was about 5 years ago in the dead of winter when this happened. I was 23 and working long shifts as a nurse at a hospital in a small city. Most nights I would get off work exhausted, barely able to keep my eyes open as I drove home. But that night I felt restless. I was out of groceries and decided to stop by the 24-hour store on my way home. It was just after midnight when I pulled into the lot. The streetlights glowed faintly in the icy air, their yellow light reflecting off patches of frozen asphalt. There were only a handful of cars scattered across the lot. An old pickup near the entrance, a newer sedan parked further out, and an old beat-up car a few rows over. The car caught my eye because it looked out of place, like it didn't belong. But I brushed it off. I was tired, and paranoia wasn't new to me after long shifts. I parked near the entrance under one of the dim streetlights. The store always seemed understaffed at night, and I didn't want to walk far in the dark. As I locked my car and stepped out, I felt the sharp bite of the cold against my cheeks. The air was so still it felt unnatural, like the world was holding its breath. Inside, the store was eerily quiet, with only the soft hum of the overhead lights and the faint rustle of a clerk stocking shelves. I quickly grabbed what I needed: milk, bread, and a few snacks. The cashier barely looked at me as he scanned my items, but as I paid, I glanced out the window. That's when I noticed something strange. The beat-up car I'd seen earlier had moved. It was now parked directly next to mine, even though the lot was nearly empty. My stomach sank. Maybe it was a coincidence. Maybe the driver just wanted to park closer to the light like I did. But something about it didn't sit right. The windows of the car were fogged up, but I could make out a figure sitting inside, still and unmoving. I told myself not to overthink it. I'd lived in this city long enough to know it wasn't the safest, but I didn't want to overreact. Gripping my keys tightly, I stepped out of the store and headed toward my car. The air felt heavier now, and my footsteps seemed unnaturally loud on the pavement. As I approached, I kept my eyes on the beat-up car. The figure inside hadn't moved. It was a man, wearing a baseball cap pulled low over his face. His posture was strange, rigid, almost mannequin-like. He was staring straight ahead, his hands gripping the steering wheel tightly. A chill ran down my spine. I told myself to act natural, to get in my car quickly and leave. But my hands were shaking as I unlocked the door. The second I slid into the driver's seat, I locked the doors and glanced over at the man. That's when he turned his head. Our eyes met and my heart stopped. His face was pale, almost gray, and his eyes were off. They glinted unnaturally in the dim light, and his expression was blank, as if he wasn't really seeing me. I froze, gripping the steering wheel so hard my knuckles turned white. Then, without warning, he opened his car door. My instincts screamed at me to leave. I turned the ignition, praying my car wouldn't stall, and the engine roared to life. The man stepped out of his car, his movements slow and deliberate. He didn't say anything, he just stood there staring at me with those cold, unblinking eyes. I threw the car into reverse, my tires screeching against the pavement as I backed out of the space. My breath was coming in short gasps, and my heart felt like it was going to explode. As I pulled onto the main road, I glanced in my rearview mirror, hoping he wasn't following me. But then I saw it. His car's headlights flickered on, and he pulled out of the lot. I tried to stay calm, telling myself it was just a coincidence. But as I took turn after turn, trying to shake him, he stayed right behind me. The distance between us never closed, but it never widened either. He was following me, and he wanted me to know it. I thought about driving home, but the idea of him knowing where I lived made me sick. Instead, I decided to head toward the police station downtown. My hands were trembling as I gripped the wheel, my eyes darting between the road and the mirror. He was still there, his headlights glowing like two cold eyes in the darkness. When I finally pulled into the police station lot, I didn't stop until I was right in front of the building. I parked and looked back, expecting to see his car right behind me. But he wasn't there. His car had stopped at the edge of the lot, its headlights glaring at me for a moment before it sped off into the night. I sat there for a long time, my hands still gripping the wheel. The police came out to check on me, but there wasn't much they could do. They asked if I got his plate number, but I hadn't been thinking clearly enough to check. For weeks after, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched. Every time I walked to my car at night, I felt his eyes on me. And sometimes when I'm alone in a parking lot, I swear I can still see those headlights in my rearview mirror.
When I first moved into my apartment, I was full of excitement. It was my first time living on my own, and I'd saved for months to afford it. The building wasn't anything fancy, just a 3-story complex in a quiet neighborhood. My unit was on the 3rd floor, tucked in a corner at the end of the hall. It felt cozy, private, and most importantly, safe. At least that's how it felt during the day. One night, about a month after I moved in, I was curled up on the couch watching a movie. It had been a long week at work, and I was enjoying the peace and quiet. The hallway outside my apartment was always silent after 10 p.m., one of the perks of having older neighbors. That's why, when I heard a knock at the door around midnight, I immediately felt uneasy. I muted the TV and sat there for a moment, listening. The knock came again, louder this time. My heart started to race. No one ever visited me, let alone that late at night. I got up slowly, my socked feet silent on the carpet, and approached the door. Peering through the peephole, I saw a man standing there. He looked to be in his 30s or 40s, wearing a dark hoodie that obscured most of his face. He stood with his shoulders slightly hunched, shifting his weight from foot to foot. Every few seconds, he glanced over his shoulder as if checking to see if anyone was coming. My stomach churned. "Who is it?" I called out, trying to keep my voice steady. The man hesitated. I think I have the wrong apartment," he said, his voice muffled through the door. It sounded shaky, almost unsure, but something about his tone felt off. Too rehearsed, too calculated. I didn't open the door. "There's no one here by that name," I replied firmly. For a moment he didn't move. Then he leaned closer to the door, so close that I could hear his breathing through the thin wood. "Are you sure?" he asked, his tone sharper now, more insistent. My heart was pounding so loudly I could barely think. I took a step back, gripping my phone. "You have the wrong apartment," I said again, louder this time. But he didn't leave. Instead, I heard a faint scratching sound. My blood ran cold as I realized he was jiggling the doorknob, testing it. "I'm calling the police," I shouted, my voice shaking. That finally seemed to scare him off. I heard quick footsteps retreating down the hall, followed by the faint echo of the stairwell door closing. Shaking, I called the police and told them what happened. They arrived within minutes, checking the building and the surrounding area, but the man was gone. One of the officers assured me it was probably just someone trying random doors, looking for an easy target. "It happens," he said casually, as if that was supposed to make me feel better, but I couldn't shake the feeling that he wasn't just lost. He knew what he was doing. Over the next few weeks, I became hyper-aware of every sound. I double and triple checked the locks on my door every night and kept a kitchen knife by my bed just in case. For a while, I thought I was being paranoid until it happened again. It was about 2 weeks after the first incident. I was in bed drifting off to sleep when I heard faint footsteps in the hallway. They stopped right outside my door. My blood ran cold. I lay there, frozen, listening as the footsteps lingered for what felt like an eternity. Then a soft knock broke the silence. I didn't move. I didn't even breathe. The knock came again, followed by the sound of someone trying the doorknob. My heart was racing so fast I thought I might pass out. I reached for my phone and dialed 911, whispering to the operator that someone was trying to break into my apartment. This time, when the police arrived, they found fresh scratches on my doorframe, evidence that someone had been trying to force it open. But once again, the man was gone. They told me to be cautious, to keep my doors locked and report any further incidents. After that, I couldn't stay there anymore. I broke my lease and moved in with a friend until I could find another place. To this day, I don't know who that man was or what he wanted, but sometimes, late at night, I still hear those faint knocks in my dreams.
When I was 16, my family moved to a rural area in upstate New York. Our new house was surrounded by dense woods on all sides. It was the kind of place that looked picturesque during the day, sunlight streaming through the trees, birds chirping in the distance. But at night, it felt different, darker, like the woods were hiding something. Our backyard stretched right up to the tree line, and my bedroom window faced the woods. At first, I loved the view. I'd sit by the window, sketching or daydreaming, watching the wind rustle the leaves. But as the weeks went on, I started to notice things, small, strange things that didn't make sense. It started with noises, faint rustling sounds late at night, too loud to be the wind, but too soft to be an animal. Then I'd hear footsteps, slow, deliberate, crunching on the leaves just beyond the trees. I told myself it was nothing, maybe a deer or a neighbor cutting through the woods, but deep down, I felt uneasy. One night, I was up late finishing homework. The house was quiet. My parents had gone to bed hours ago. My window was cracked open to let in the cool night air. It was close to midnight when I heard it, a rustling sound, followed by those familiar footsteps. But this time, they didn't stop at the tree line. They were coming closer. I froze, my pencil hovering above the page as I listened. The footsteps were slow and heavy, each one deliberate. My room was dark except for the faint glow of my desk lamp, and I felt exposed, vulnerable. I got up slowly and moved to the window, peering outside. That's when I saw him. A man standing just beyond the trees, his figure barely visible in the moonlight. He wasn't moving, just standing there, staring toward the house. My stomach churned as fear prickled up my spine. He was too far away for me to make out his face, but something about the way he stood, so still, so unnatural, made my skin crawl. I quietly closed the window and locked it, my hands trembling. I thought about waking my parents, but I didn't want to scare them. Instead, I turned off my light and sat in the dark, watching. The man didn't move for what felt like hours. Then, slowly, he took a step closer, and another. He stopped directly beneath my window. I held my breath, terrified he'd look up and see me. But he didn't. Instead, he crouched down and picked something up from the ground. Then, without a word, he turned and walked back into the woods. The next morning, I went outside to see if I could find any sign of him. That's when I saw the footprints. Deep, clear prints leading from the woods to my window. And just beneath it was a small pile of rocks, carefully arranged in a circle. I never opened my window at night again. To this day, I don't know who he was or what the rocks meant. But sometimes, when I walk through the woods, I feel like someone's watching me, just beyond the trees.